Hey, I got the $1 million question, right? For those that claim the mark of the beast is a microchip, right? With everything going on in the earth, who's going to implement the mark of the beast? What nation is going to implement the mark of the beast? Because if you say it's all white people, you got to be specific, because obviously Russia is not doing what America is doing. China is not doing what America is doing. Iran is definitely not doing what America is doing. What nations or what white nation is going to implement the mark of the beast? Because if you say it's America, then obviously it ain't going to be the whole world. So this is where the doctrine kind of falls very short. It just it takes a deep dive very short. If the mark of the beast is going to be a worldwide thing and you can't eat, right, and drink and buy and sell, right, all of this stuff with a physical chip, the $1 million question is, who's going to implement it? And I'm going to leave y'all with that.
Giving all praises to Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shah, by Hashem HaKodash. Send double honors to our apostles and elders here, Great Millstone. Peace and blessings to the Lord's hopefully elect. Now, the answer to the question is quite simple. You simply just go to the scriptures. The scriptures tell you. You know, that would be a question for somebody who is not who's not in the truth, or who doesn't claim to be in the truth, and who, quite frankly, has never read a Bible scripture at all. Because if you look up Mark of the Beast and you go to the book of Revelation, it explains to you who it is that's going to do it. It says the beast is going to do it. And then the question is, who is the beast? And then to answer your question, well, wait a minute, they not all in line. Well, that's why you go to the book to explain it. You know, I don't believe this guy Chief Ephraim to be, you could say, like, in the truth. You only see him when there's talks about, like, getting carnal and saying things that are just not prophetic, or saying things that aren't spiritual. You know, scriptures talk about we have a lot of agents that come into this, and spies and things of that nature. And in my history, ask the question is, when's the last time you actually heard this man, like, do a lesson or read a scripture or do a breakdown? Like, you'll be hard pressed to try to find that information. You know, just talks. And last year, when it came to that Palestinian scuffle that the Israelites had, he was one of the leading ones to take charge and say everybody needs to pull up. I believe it was in Chicago, so we can go out here and we can show these Palestinians that we ain't no punks. So every time he comes up and speak is really on the carnal side. I mean, to me, you know, I'm like, every time I say, okay, that guy's just an agent. He just kind of put in to try to ruffle up spirits, or try to paint Israelites with a broad stroke that Israelites are carnal. You know what I mean? Like I said, you'll be hard pressed to try to find the last time he actually did a lesson, or actually broke down the scripture or did a breakdown. You know, he just, what you would call a Israelite community, you know, go along, you know, let's try to unify, but that doesn't work, because he was apparently with HOI, which was pre-Sabak, and then they ended up breaking off. So wait a minute, I thought this unity stuff was a part of the goal. No. Okay, no. So we'll just read it in the scripture, and then I want to address something that he says, which is the same stance that actually pre-Sabak takes, and it's going to be a stance that pretty soon you're going to hear any Israelite who doesn't teach the mark of the beast, the chip, that they're going to take, and ultimately they're going to be held responsible for it. And that take, in short, is to say, well, you know, because when the chip comes, right, and you got groups that ain't teaching it, they're going to say, oh, well, common sense should tell anybody not to go get that. I mean, we really don't have to speak on that because common sense should say you shouldn't take that. Well, according to the scriptures, you're going to be held liable. Okay, and the blood's going to be on your hands. But this is the book of Revelation, chapter 17. Really, the answer is in this chapter. As it says at the top, and there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters. And this chapter actually breaks down what all this means. So let's pretend for a second that Chief Ephraim is actually looking for a biblical answer, which I don't believe he does. Okay, I believe this is just that time for these false prophets and agents to start conditioning people to just follow the authority, follow what's written, basically condition the people to take the chip. And we know that Romans 13, okay, is a popular verse that's used in history, that's been used when a society or those who have 501c3, when they want to get people to fall in line with the government policy, they tell the political leaders, not political leaders, influential leaders that are on the payroll to use Romans 13 as a way to condition the people. So we know pretty soon that breakdown is going to be brought up to just say, oh, you should just go along with whatever the government says. And that's how you know that they've all gotten a script at the same time. And this is just conditioning for people to take the chip, to look at the chip like, that's what this is. But if we take a minute to pretend that he actually wants a biblical answer, which he doesn't, the book of Revelation explains it. So verse 2, it says, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of the fornication. So right here, it just tells you that there's a great whore that sitteth upon many waters, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, meaning they jumped and laid in with the same bed, and they drunk of her wine and fornication, which means they actually believed in the doctrine or the policies that the whore sitteth. And if you jump down, verse start at 9, it says, and there is the mind which have, and here is the mind which have wisdom. The seven heads are seven mountains on which the woman sitteth, and mountains represents power structures of government. It says, and there are seven kings, five are fallen, and one is, and the other is not yet to come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth, and is of the seven, and goeth into perdition. And I'll pull up those seven before the video ends. But the beast that was and is not, and is the eighth, is referring to the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire is a part of the seven, but it's also a part of the eighth. But there is no eighth. Well, that's because it's just the seventh reborn, which is America. During the time of John the Revelator, the Roman Empire was still in power. That's why it says was and is not and is the eighth. It was because it was existing at that time. It is not because it hasn't been reborn yet as America. And it's even the eighth, which is of the seventh, as the scripture just said. Okay, it says, and go into perdition. Verse 12, okay, here's the breakdown. It says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest, which are 10 kings, which is the foundation of NATO, which NATO and the EU are the NATO and the EU. Okay, NATO was founded by 10 countries. Now it's over 100 some countries in one agreement. And you got to remember, NATO was originally founded to combat the USSR, but the Soviet Union, but the Soviet Union has since been disbanded back. What year is that? 1 second. So 1991 is when the Soviet Union was disbanded. But the question is, if NATO was originally formed to combat the USSR, why is NATO still around? Simple, because the scripture says that's going to be the armies that's going to try to fight the Lord. Okay. And it all goes into Ezekiel 38 as well, because basically the Lord is going to put the spirit on Gog, which is Russia, to think an evil thought and to say I'm about to march back down there. And when Russia had seized Ukraine, one of the things Putin said was that he wants to relive the glory days. He wants to reform the USSR. So NATO was ultimately, the answer is NATO was formed and kept for the sake of prophecy, for the sake of the Lord. Okay. So back in Revelation 12, it says, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast." Okay. They have one mind, meaning they have one agreement. And the agreement is to follow the ways of the Roman Empire, which is reborn through America in their policy. It says, "These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and Kings of kings, and they that are with him are called, chosen, and faithful." See, they're going to try to fight the Lord, as is prophesied in 2nd Ezra, the 13th chapter, and that's where you see the Lord fighting them, and they get destroyed. It says, "And he said unto me, the waters, okay, which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." So if you go back up, what he saw in the first verse, "And there came one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters." So you got the great whore, which is Babylon. When it says she sitteth upon many waters, it's talking about, what does it say in 15? Peoples, multitudes, and nations and tongues. Okay. And even in verse 2, it says, "With whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication." So these peoples, nations, and tongues, these variety of nations, have agreed to jump in the same bed with Babylon the Great. Okay. So verse 16, it says, "And the 10 horns which is the NATO, which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire." So eventually the scriptures, the prophecy says that they're gonna jump in the same bed with the whore. They're gonna commit fornication with her. Then they will eventually hate her. Meaning they're gonna feel like they've been disrespected. They're gonna feel like they've been deceived, and it's already happening now, because who's essentially fueling Israel to attack Iran right now and to do all they're doing? It's Babylon the Great. The whole world condemns the actions of these Edomites, in particular the state of Israel, but they know that they're only doing it because America, which is Babylon the Great, is backing them. So they're all beginning to hate this whore, because they're saying, "What are y'all doing? I thought the whole point was world peace. America, whore, okay, you have the power to stop this, put an end to it." So this is them beginning to hate. Okay. And one of the next lessons I was going to do is talk about how really what's next. And one of the things that's next, according to prophecy, okay, is that we need Turkey. Turkey's going to end up leaving NATO to join Russia. And then the chip. There's certain things that have to happen, and we're still waiting to happen, that we can pretty much see that it's going to happen. So verse 17, here's the point right here. "For Yahweh have put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of Yahweh shall be fulfilled." That's the point. The Lord is putting in their hearts to fulfill his will. They are going to give their kingdom into the beast. They're going to be deceived and give their kingdom into the beast. So when it comes on the topic of digital currency, well, let me finish this. It says, "And the woman which thou sawest is the great city which reigneth over kings of the earth." Okay. America is that city. Unless you're saying America is not that city, Like I said, this is coming from somebody who clearly, that question should come from somebody who doesn't read the scriptures or doesn't understand the scriptures. If you call yourself in the scriptures, then you should know that the chapter explains what is going on. But that's why I think he's not really looking for an answer. He's just an agent conditioning the people to take the chip. Anyway, when it comes to the digital currency, okay, that is basically being uniformly accepted worldwide, even by BRICS. Okay, the BRICS currency, when they're making their own currency, okay, they're agreeing that digital currency is better. A digital currency is going to be better for the society, the central banking, etc. And that's what's going to affect. And that's happening, you could basically say, worldwide, because you got to remember the dollar currently still has it's like a stronghold over the earth. And when the dollar collapses, there's going to have to be a substitute. Okay. And worldwide, okay, just like Sweden, look at Sweden. Sweden is already pushing out the mark of the beast, the chip. It's already digital. Okay. These people, look, when you look at the WEF, when you hear them devils like Yuval Harari, when they go up there and speak, when you look at the crowd, guess who it is? It's all peoples, nations, and tongues. And they're all basically being deceived, and they're going to agree to the system. And in this system that they're talking about implementing, is everybody monitored and controlled for the greater good. And they're all believing that. They're all pushing towards that. So they're going to allow themselves to be deceived because the will of the Lord. And then once they realize they've been deceived, then that's when they're going to hate the whore. But they are going to change their system over to digital, and they are going to enforce this new way of currency for the chip, and they're already basically doing it now. So to answer your question is, according to prophecy, they're going to do it. When it comes to this chip, they're going to follow through and agree that the system is for digital and is for the better of the good, or whatever the case is. Because in the end, they're eventually going to hate the whore and destroy her. See? And like the elder was going into, you have proof that even in Russia and these other countries, they're already implementing their own digital currency. They're already doing it. You know? So now to deal with this next part. A brother clipped this, okay? And he said this was like a year ago. So this is what he said a year ago.
One time only. I believe the philosophies and Caesar Borgia and the chip, it all plays a part of the beast. It all plays a part of the Antichrist. You understand? I'm not going back and forth with it. I don't care for it. I believe it all plays a role in the end time prophecy. Do we have to go into telling a brother not to get a chip? No. Leviticus 19:28 tells you what? You're not supposed to put no cuttings in your flesh. So it's common sense not to put something in your damn right arm or your forehead. Think about it. It's common sense. That's in the Levitical law. So do I have to tell somebody to not get a chip implanted in their skin? No. The scriptures already tell you that. Common sense. Leave me alone about that. I'm not going back and forth with niggas about that. I'm out here trying to take niggas off the dope needle. Trying to turn niggas into brothers. Trying to turn whores into sisters, man. Y'all worried about all this other stuff, man. There's a bigger picture out here. Stop being a sucker, man. Use righteous judgment, not hate speech.
Everything he just said was wrong. But that's how you know this guy ain't no prophet, man. He just said, I don't care for it. I'm not dealing with that prophecy stuff. I don't care for it. Okay. Well, right here, you just admitted that it all has something to do, and now you're saying it. This is how you know whenever you're dealing with a false prophet or a false teacher, they don't remember the last thing they said. So you can always go back and catch them in their words and saying something different. All of them. So, in his own speech, he contradicted himself because he just said, common sense should tell you Levitical laws that you shouldn't implement nothing in your skin. So I don't have to tell a nigga about the chip. I don't have to tell him. But then he said that his more important thing is that he's trying to get somebody off a dope needle. Isn't a dope needle drugs that you implemented in your skin to harm yourself? Why are you trying to school these niggas out here about getting them off the dope needle when common sense should say not to stick something in your skin to hurt yourself. Didn't you just say that? Didn't you just say that's more important to get somebody off a dope needle? But common sense you shouldn't have to tell nobody, because Levitical law, you shouldn't have to implement something in your skin. I can say that that's common sense. I'm trying to get people off a dope needle. Well, common sense should tell you, and it's Levitical law, not to insert a needle in your skin to harm yourself. Common sense should tell you not to be a damn faggot, but there's our people's doing that. So that argument is stupid. But that's, like I said, this is, if you're an agent and you just speaking, you're gonna say those things. Okay, but however, he's not the only one that actually made that argument. It was in the past. It was actually Priest of Bach, which they were at one point in the same unity camp. He made that same argument as well. He was basically saying that no, your phones already have microchips, so that ain't it. But then he said, well, common sense should tell you not to take it anyway because it's in the law. And that's when we was like, got to stop you there. Okay. Ain't no talking about some common sense when it comes to going out and teaching the people of Israel the commandments of the Lord. Because as he told Ezekiel chapter 3:17, Son of man, I have made thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore heed ye the word of my mouth and give them warning from me. When I say unto the wicked, thou shalt surely die, if thou givest him not warning, nor speakest to warn the wicked from his wicked way, to save his life, the same wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at thine hand. Yet if thou warn the wicked, and he turn not from his wickedness, nor from his wicked way, he shall die in his iniquity, but thou hast delivered thy soul. So the Lord commanded Ezekiel to go out and to teach Israel what you would find to be considered common sense. And he had to tell them whether they hear or forbear. So it don't matter what you think or common sense should say, because the Levitical law, it's the Levitical law. So common sense. So should I have to teach somebody if it's in the Levitical law? Yeah, that's the whole point. Because you just can't say common sense in the Levitical law says not to eat pork. Why do you have to teach our people to eat pork? That means you shouldn't teach any laws then, because if it's in the Levitical law, then it's quote unquote common sense. You got Israelites that know themselves as Israelites, and they willfully bald their head and put a razor to their beard. Do you have to tell them that they're going off? Because that's Levitical law. So the point is you have Israelites who know that they're Israelites still breaking the Levitical law. And even Israel back then, they knew they were Israelites. They knew that the Lord was Yahweh. They still broke the law. They were worshiping other gods, sacrificing to other idols. You know, the Lord said, I'm not sending thee to somebody who doesn't know me or who can't understand your language or who's stranger. I'm sending you to Israel, my people, hard-headed. They know what they're doing is wrong, but you going to have to tell them anyway. And you're going to use my law. So that approach of saying common sense should tell you in the end not to take it anyway. It ain't like, it's in the law. It's your common sense. That's not going to hold any weight. Is actually weak. That's not in the scriptures at all. You have to tell the people what not to do if it's punishable by death in this word of the Lord. I would argue that Chief Ephraim is saying that simply because he probably heard it from Priest of Bach saying that, and that's dangerous. And he's like, yeah, I can use that. I can use it. I could tell somebody it's common sense. Nah, and judgment still is going to be on your hand. Okay, but that I believe more Israelites are going to say that as we get closer to the chip, and they don't want to admit that they were wrong. That in the end they're going to say, well, common sense should tell. Nope, that's blood on your hands. Blood on your hands. Now all of a sudden it's about common sense. Why are we going out and teaching our people what's right and wrong? Shouldn't that be common sense? But it's not common sense. It's not common sense to our people. And even if it is, if it's in the scriptures, you got to teach it to them. You got to break it down to them. Talking about some, I don't care for it. Leave me alone about it. I'm worried about bigger things. That's exactly something that a false prophet or an agent would say. But like I said, weak, okay, weak, tired, holds no weight according to the scriptures. And our job is to just keep proclaiming it, because this is what the Lord wants us to do, as we just read. Okay, with that, shalom.